Good morning. Let's start seated. So just finding a nice comfy seat and letting your body settle in here. Shoulders roll back. Find a space where you are even right across that shoulder girdle. Try to level out my world a little bit. And let's just take a couple of rounds of breath here. Just finding our way into position of ease and freedom of breath. Last 20-ish seconds here. And as you're right, let's turn our head over towards the right. So gaze is over the right shoulder, draw that left shoulder back. And then we'll return to center. And we'll gaze over our left shoulder, keeping the shoulder girdle as even as possible as we do so. And we'll come back to neutral. We're going to turn back over that right shoulder. This time, take your left hand to the small of the back of the hand against the back palm away from you, and squeeze the elbow back towards the back of your room. And as you take that elbow back, see if there's just a little more room for the head to rotate. And then we'll relax and switch it up. Right hand comes to the small of the back, gaze over that left shoulder, draw that left elbow back as you do so. Really think about if there's a little bit, right elbow back, excuse me, there's a little bit more room to rotate the head and neck. And then relax back to neutral. And inhale, take the gaze up towards the ceiling space, the chin lifts. Squeeze the shoulders down towards the floor. And then relax back to neutral. And let's transition to hands and knees tabletop. We're coming into our base tabletop alignment, finger mounds, rooting down. Think about neutralizing the spine. Exhale, sink the seat back into child's pose. Inhale, we're going to start to round the back. And as we round, we're going to lift all the way up. We'll end in a cat pose. And then exhale, we come back to neutral and sink back into child's pose. Inhale, middle of the back rounds, we lift, and we end up in that modified tabletop of cat. And then you just sink, exhale, and sink back into child's pose. And let's just go through that little cycle of breath just a few more times. Really trying to create as much round as is possible as you come up. Taking a little bit of that early shoulder space that we've offered the body and transitioning into that middle back flexion. On the next time you come forward, go through that cat expression and then soften down and find tabletop. From our tabletop, we're going to drop our belly with an exhale. So belly drops into cow, chin lifts, tailbone lifts. As the tailbone lifts, tuck the toes underneath you, and we're just going to roll and press back into down dog. With the exhale, we come back forward. We land in tabletop. As the knees touch down, the belly drops, the chin lifts, tailbone lifts. Inhale, we start to roll back and find our way into down dog. And exhale, we start to come forward. As the knees land, the belly drops, tailbone lifts, chin lifts. So inhales to down dog, exhales to cow. And we'll work back and forth here with a little extension articulation interlaced in the movement. And let's allow our body to move through this shape 3 more times. And when we're complete, when we're finished, when we've moved through that 3rd cycle, just sink back into child's pose and we'll all meet there. In that last few rounds of movement, really pay attention to the full articulation of the spine. Think about the tailbone lifting, the shoulder girdle opening, using that space we've created and finding more and more room. And then when you feel ready, when you feel settled, just drifting back into that child's pose alignment. And breathing a round or two of breath here. Child's pose relatively neutral, right? A little bit of the accentuation of the thighs into child's pose itself gives us a little tiny flexion energy. But we are relatively neutral in the spine. Just land here, breathe here, feel the body slow and soften here. As you're ready. Fingertips splay out in front of us. We re-grip the mat. Inhale, pull ourselves forward to hands and knees, tabletop. We'll get this little bit of activity from the practice out of the way. Curl the toes, lift the seat. Find our down dog once again, and then we'll walk ourselves forward into fold. Inhale into half lift. Top of the head reaches. Exhale back into fold. Top of the head melts down towards the mat. As you let go, feel the hamstrings lengthen out. Drift your awareness to your sacrum. Let's roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae, stacking the spinal column as we come up towards this stable mountain pose. In mountain, broaden out across the collarbones, roll the palms forward. Think about rooting down as you engage the glutes here, and then inhale your hands together at heart center. Middle body aligned, sweep the arms up and overhead. Exhale through forward fold. Slide your left foot straight back into lunge. Ground your left knee. Bring the top of the left foot down to the mat so that it anchors you, and sweep yourself up into this little grounded crescent. Again, I know a lot of movement here. Interlace the fingers at the top and squeeze the elbows back towards the back of the room. Shoulders are coming with us. We're trying to keep that shoulder, elbow, wrist line intact. And then float those hands down. Bring your left toe mound back to the mat. Lift your left leg back into lunge. Step forward and into fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Slide that right foot straight back. Right knee comes down. Flip the top of the right foot. Sweep yourself up and into grounded crescent. Interlace the fingers here. Squeeze those shoulders, those elbows, the wrists back. Nice long line. When you're comfortable and ready, release the hands back down to the mat. Curl the right toe mound back underneath you. Lift the right knee, step forward and into fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Grab opposite elbows, right hand to left elbow, left hand to right elbow. Rock a little side to side. Just as easy as you can be, fluidly rocking back and forth. Give ourselves 15 more seconds here to just feel the sway in the hips, in the spine, and the length of the back. And then we relax. Hands come back down to the mat. Let's walk ourselves back into what will be the last down dog of class. So last time to express yourself in down dog this particular class. Pedal and move. And then when you're ready, we'll come down to hands and knees, tabletop. Sweep the legs out in front of us so we end up in a seat. And just as the legs sweep out, follow them forward into a fold. Use that momentum of leg extension to find some length in your spine. Give yourself just 30 more seconds here in this traditional seated forward fold. When you're ready, we'll walk ourselves up to a vertical spine, staff pose. Bend your left knee. Bottom of the left foot first comes on the mat, and then pull that leg a little bit closer than would naturally fall. It doesn't have to be all the way heel to the glutes, but kind of a little closer than it would naturally fall. Then allow that left leg to fall open right where it is. And turn your belly button so it's in the middle of the right thigh, and just follow that right leg down into a fold. Remember that your right knee can bend still. And we just settle into this forward fold. Now you can grab your calf, you can grab your shin, you can grab your ankle, you can grab your heel, you can grab your toe mound. Wherever we grab, we don't want to be pulling and extending into discomfort. Pulling and extending, or extending into length, into space, is what we're looking for. If we're creating discomfort, just bend the knee until that discomfort goes away and we can find space once again. We're going to give ourselves just another 60 seconds here. Finding this length really can be a challenge post-holiday, right? Post-holiday, we have that tendency to have just a little bit more carbohydrate buildup in the musculature. We tend to feel these shapes pull on our body just a little bit more. So be aware and willing to soften into what the body wants and needs today. And when you're ready, when you feel right, we will bring the spine back to vertical and then extend that left leg down the mat so that it mirrors the right. Finding staff once again, just give your body a little opportunity to lengthen in the diaphragm space, and then bend your right knee. Then we help that right shin, right heel just a little bit closer than it would be. Right knee falls out wide, belly button to the middle of the left thigh, and we follow that into the fold. And so just for clarity, carbohydrate was a little bit of a simplistic approach, right? Really, it's glycogen. But either way, the carbohydrates we consumed tend to offer some stiffness and some rigidity in the musculature post-holiday. And we'll give ourselves about 60 more seconds here on this second side. When you are right, you are ready, we walk ourselves back up to a vertical spine. Let's bend both knees. So the left leg's gonna come in to mirror the right. Right knee comes up to point towards the ceiling. Give yourself a little squeeze here and then tuck the chin towards the sternum or forehead towards the knees or thighs. Make yourself into as small a ball as possible here. Little gentle flexion for the mid back. Just breathe into that space. Think about rolling the tops of the shoulders down towards the tailbone. So really squeezing scapula down. And then relax, chin comes back to neutral. Let the knees fall out wide and clasp on the toe mounds or the ankles. So if toe mounds don't feel accessible to, if you don't feel like you can get the hands around the toe mounds and really be there comfortably, let the hands just slide to the ankles. And then we are going to rock ourselves forward into one of these wide leg fold opportunities. Think about you can do to soften the mid back arch. So the sensation that we just had when we made ourselves into that little ball, we're trying to take some of that out. So there's a little bit of broadness in the shoulders. There's a little bit of extension energy through the cervical spine, and that helps take out some of that mid back round that we can fall into. And we're going to hold this shape for another 30 seconds here. When you're ready, we'll walk the spine back up or press the spine back up towards vertical. Let's grab our blanket and blanket towel, make that towel length. So shelf fold to one half unfold and then roll that. And we're gonna set that next to our mat on the left side. And we'll transition to our belly. And from our belly, we're going to start out in Sphinx pose. So palms down, shoulders right above the elbows, 90-degree bend in the elbows. Energizing from the fingertips back towards that elbow pit. And then add an exhale and drop the head down as low as you can get it. And as the head comes low, feel how the low back responds. If the low back responds with the sensation of expansion, stay low. So if as the head comes down, you start to feel some musculature in the low back starting to pull into length, stay low. If not, come up into a more traditional shape. And then again, you can adjust your head positioning and your torso positioning so that you don't feel compression. But we can use this shape in two ways, right? If we go low and the low back, the lumbar spine soft tissue starts to elongate, we can get some posterior chain elongation. If we bring ourselves into the more curved extension of the spine, we can start to feel some of this anterior space. So specifically the musculature supporting the diaphragm can start to really expand. Just depending on what your body can most utilize this morning. And we'll give ourselves just 30 more seconds here. Either in this low version of Sphinx or in an anterior expansion deeper into the extension. And when it feels right, as it feels perfect within you, let's just release out of Sphinx, stack the hands. We'll come into crocodile pose. And then from crocodile pose, once you have the hips set, take your left knee and bend that and capture that blanket for a little half frog. So you may need to pull that closer to you. But we just want to come out into half frog and have the forehead kind of supported. Now, remember, you can always turn your head in half frog so that one ear or the other comes down. But just have a little neutrality in the cervical spine. So there's this CEO of this business, and he is driving home from the office. The office is one of those big sky-rise buildings in a big city. He's driving home, he's sitting in traffic, and he is riddled with anxiety. Not because things aren't going good, it's because life, right? And every single time he's sitting in stop and go traffic, right? Rush hour traffic. And every single stop, it's just like building into the anxiety, into the rage meter in his body. And this is, I mean, we're talking about super financially successful human. He gets home and he has a live-in chef, and they've prepared his favorite meal. And he sits down at this big, huge mahogany table, and he takes a bite, and I mean, this is 100% his favorite thing on earth, and he's chewing it, and it just doesn't taste right. And he calls the chef in, and he's like, did you do something different? Chef's like, no, nothing different. This is your recipe. We've done it to perfection. I think we've absolutely nailed it. And he's chewing, and he's just like, oh, it just doesn't taste good. And he pushes it away. And he goes to his bedroom, and he's just in there, and he can't sleep, and he's riddled and filled with anxiety. Last 40 seconds here on this first side. When he gets up in the morning, the anxiety hasn't subsided at all. He gets in the car, stop and go traffic into the way into the office. He gets into the elevator. He goes up to the top floor. He sits down behind this huge desk. And he's looking around, and he sees like the newest computer was just delivered to him. And he has all these things, and none of them are making his life better. And so he opens DuckDuckGo, and he does a little search for ways to reduce anxiety and improve your life. When you're ready, We are extending that left leg down the mat. Taking our blanket right over to the second side, right side. And we're going to find our way back into crocodile. And from crocodile, take your right knee out so that it's captured by that blanket. We find half frog, side 2. And he reads all these different articles about ways to improve your anxiety and your life, and none of them really make any sense. There's no practical advice. And then lunch comes in. He's done no work, but he's still feeling all of this anxiety within him. Lunch comes in, and this company has catered, and it's his company, so it's by his favorite restaurant. And he's eating the food, and it just doesn't taste good. And he calls the guy over from the restaurant, and he's like, is there something changed in the recipe? They're like, no. This is your favorite meal from our place, right off the top of the menu. We named it after you. And he pushes it away, and he stands up from his desk, and he resigns. He gets in his car, he drives home. It's the middle of the day, so there's no traffic. Smooth sailing the whole way. And he sits down in his big leather chair at home, and he starts to think about, what he wanted to do when he was a kid. And he had always had this desire as a little kid to explore India. He never knew why. He gets online, back to DuckDuckGo, types in airfare to India, buys a ticket, jumps on a plane. 18 hours later, he's there. Last 30 seconds here on this second side. When you're right, when you're ready. That right leg's going to extend down the mat so that it can mirror the left. And let's press ourselves up to hands and knees tabletop. And from tabletop, we'll sweep the legs around so we end up in a seat once again. We're going to take our blanket and slide it behind us so that it runs the length of the spine. And then slowly, gently, delicately lower ourselves down onto this blanket prop. Now, I should have plenty of length to offer support for the head. We're going to do something just a little bit different for at least the first half of this. We're going to put our palms down and then tuck the palms into the small of the back. The fingers can either go on top of the blanket or you can go under the blanket, whatever feels most comfortable for you. But we're looking for a little openness, little additional openness across the shoulder girdle here. So generally, this is a pretty good shoulder opener. Today, we're going to take a little of the internal rotation openness too. Now, the knees can be wherever feels comfortable. Knees can be out wide, legs can be extended, knees can be bent, whatever feels appropriate for you. And then just settle in, find your fluidity of breath once again, and think about rolling the front corner, top of the shoulders, back towards the mat. And at the same time, taking that medial edge, the inner edge of the scapula, and pushing it towards the edges of the mat. So shoulders are rolling down, Shoulder blades are pressing out. So he lands in India. He picks up the phone. First thing he does, been thinking about this the whole flight. He picks up the phone, calls back home, and tells his assistant to sell everything he has and put all of the money into his account. And the assistant's like, "Are you sure?" Like, "I want you to do this. I want you to sell every single thing that I have. Put whatever you get from it into my account." And so that starts to happen. And now he's carrying these big suitcases and these bags full of stuff. And he's just like, "What am I doing here? I'm holding these suitcases full of things. I just sold everything I had back at home." He just drops the suitcases and walks away. And way, way out in the distance, he sees these mountains, the Himalayas. And he starts just walking towards them, right? With no real plan or path, just an idea in front of him. And he starts going towards them. And as he's walking, he starts to notice there's a little bit of a lightness to him. Some of that anxiety, not all of that anxiety, but some of that anxiety that's been plaguing him was left back with the suitcases. Now, if you want to move here, feel free to take the arms out from this internal rotation and go to an external rotation of cactus. But you're welcome to stay where you are as well. If that's feeling really good, if you're feeling like that's creating some space, stay there. If a adjustment into external rotation would feel good, or you want to test if it would feel good, now's the perfect time. As the days are passing, he's getting closer and closer to these mountains, and they're getting bigger and bigger in his field of vision, right? Mountains aren't growing, but they are growing in comparison to what he's seeing. And eventually he gets to the base, and there's a road going up. So he starts to walk it. And slowly he starts ascending these mountains. It's been probably a couple weeks at this point, and he did not save a single thing. He has the pair of clothes he's wearing, and that's it. And the clothes are starting to show the wear of several weeks worth of travel. It's the middle of the summer, so the temperatures aren't brutally cold, but they're getting crisper and crisper as he ascends. After a few days of walking up this road, the road ends. And there's a path, much less traveled, much less worn, that continues to ascend this mountain range. So he follows the path. And he's going by these sheer cliffs where there's only like sometimes 6 to 12 inches of walking space between the side of a cliff and the seemingly never-ending fall, but he keeps traveling this path. And then eventually, the path itself is gone. And he stops and he looks around. Last 20 seconds here. And he's trying to assess what to do now. The path just ended abruptly without any real rhyme or reason to it. He's on the middle of this mountain face. When it feels right within you, let's just roll to one side or the other, whatever side feels most appropriate for you. And we'll slide that blanket out from underneath us. Just set that to the side for a moment. And then we'll come back onto our backs on the mat. And slide your hands to the shin bones. So just below the knees is most ideal here. And then squeeze your shoulder blades back into the floor. Continue to squeeze the shoulder blades back into the floor as you push your left knee forward. So as the left knee pushes forward, you're going to feel tautness around the arm and in the shoulder structure. Keep driving that left shoulder blade back and down as you pull here. And then relax into the left and take this over to the right. So the right knee starts to push forward. The right shoulder blade hugs back towards the mat. And there's a tautness in the musculature of the right arm just from the knee pushing forward. And relax. Let's do that to the left side again. And relax in the right side again. Then relax. Feet come down to the mat. Bottoms of the feet come together. Knees fall out wide. Arms here are going to extend towards the ceiling, then interlace and see if you can turn the palms away from you. If you can turn the palms away from you, do. If not, palms stay down. And then we'll extend the arms overhead, not towards the ceiling, but towards the wall behind you now. And as you get down in that shape, use that shoulder space to really elongate the entirety of the torso. So press the hands away from you, palms up or palms down. And then relax the arms to cactus. Bring the knees back to neutral, kneecaps point towards the ceiling. Pull the thighs in towards the rib cage, take the hands to the shins. Push the left shin away from you. Left knee away from you, I guess more accurately. Relax, push the right knee away from you. Arm gets taut. Relax. Feet come down to the mat. Knees fall out wide. Arms extend up towards the ceiling. Fingers interlace, palms down or palms up, whatever feels most ideal. Then extend the arms towards the wall behind you. And utilize that space, pressing the hands away to lengthen the torso. And relax to cactus. Last 40 seconds here. And we'll inhale, help the knees back to neutral. Grab that blanket roll and slide that underneath the neck. try to get the chin a little bit extra lift here. So the chin is tilted slightly towards the back of the room. And there's some nice pressure in the middle of the cervical spine. And then drop your hands to your, so bend the knees, heel toe the heels as close as you can get them to the glutes. And then press your finger mounds into your thighs. So you push the finger mounds into the thighs and try to push the thighs away from you, trying to straighten the arms. In that same way we use the knees to straighten the arms, now we're using the straightening of the arms to push the thighs away. And now I feel some of that lower back expansion. And relax. Heel toe the feet out to the width of the mat, let the knees fall together, and let your hands rest just kind of middle of the sternum. Maybe at the base, just above the diaphragm. And start to subtly rock your head side to side. Not a big rotation here, just a subtle little shift left to right, just enough to feel any imbalance in the structure of the spine or in the musculature of the cervical spine. So he looks around and he decides, he's come this far. There's only one direction to go, and that is up. And he looks up, and it does not look like it's going to be easy. And he starts kind of scrambling up this mountain face, this rock face. And that scramble eventually ends at a point where there is a sheer cliff face. One of those cliff faces he's been walking at when he's been at lower altitudes. And now he's going to be forced to climb it, and he has to make a decision. And he just kind of like pauses, takes a breath, and as he does that, he realizes, even looking at this sheer rock face, the anxiety is gone. And he turns around almost gleefully, puts his hand on the wall, puts his foot on the wall, and he starts to ascend this cliff face. And he's going slow, right? He's never rock climbed before. This is not an easy task. There's also thousands and thousands of feet of mountain below him should he fall. He's being very delicate and careful with his movement. Last 45 seconds here. And he, step after step, hand placement after hand placement, makes his way to the top. And he pulls himself over this cliff face. And he looks down from the summit of this mountain. And it's at that moment that the temperatures start to sink in. When you're ready, walk your feet back in. Take your knees out to the width of your feet and then walk your feet back in line with your hips. Knees follow so that we end up in a nice little traditional alignment there. And you can keep the blanket where it is, or you can remove it. We're going to start to rock our knees side to side here. So we start to wind down the end of class here. We just bring in this knee sway, start to accentuate that movement further and further, really feeling into each rotation. Eventually, when it feels right within us, we'll let the knees fall to one side or the other, whatever side feels most appropriate for you. And so his body starts to shiver. And he huddles down and he tries to make himself into a small ball as possible. And he just tries to hold as much warmth as he possibly can. And as he's doing that, he feels the weight of a blanket being wrapped around him. And he looks up, and there's this yogi. And this yogi wraps him in a blanket, helps him to his feet, and then slowly, it's an old man, slowly walks him over to this little hut he's built, or someone's built. And he pulls him inside, and they sit down, and somehow, some way, this yogi knows enough English that they can communicate. And the yogi asks, what are you doing here? And the man starts to tell his story, starts to talk about how he used to be a CEO. And as he says that, he looks down at his clothes and they're just tattered. They're barely there. And he says, that must kind of be a surprise to you. And the yogi doesn't change his expression at all. And he explains how he got to India and how he got on this road and how the road took him towards the mountains and how he started to climb the mountains, and then the road on the mountain ended, and then the path on the mountain ended, and he just started climbing, and then here he is. And the yogi listens to his story and says, "Oh, wow, you must be hungry." And the man realizes he hasn't eaten in weeks. Part of the reason his clothes are so tattered is they're just the wrong size for him now. And so the man says, "I'm starving." You're absolutely right. And the yogi goes and he turns and he has this kind of makeshift kitchen-esque thing, this heating element. And he starts to make food. When you're ready, knees return to neutral, and we'll let the knees fall over to that second side. And we just settle here, allowing the spinal rotation to support us. And about 90 more seconds here on the second side. We're just settling in, finding the fluidity in our breath. After about 90 minutes, the yogi turns around and he has this bowl of gruel. There's no other way to describe it. And he slides it across this little table to this man. The man looks down at it and it just looks terrible. And trembling, he picks up his spoon and slowly starts to lower it down towards the bowl. When you're ready, the knees are going to return back to neutral, kneecaps point towards the ceiling, breath is stable and fluid once again. Let the eyes close, let the awareness drift within you. Ask yourself if there's anything you want, anything you need, anything that would be beneficial left in practice before you ease yourself into a state, into a shape where you can appreciate Shavasana. And so his spoon comes down into this gruel. He picks it up. He his hand trembling, puts it in his mouth, and to his surprise, it tastes delicious. And he finishes the bowl, and after dinner, he has this huge smile on his face. The yogi looks at him and says, for a man who nearly froze to death 3 hours ago, you sure are happy. And he looks back at this yogi and he says, well, my new friend, I have achieved the greatest thing ever in life. And the yogi's curious, like, oh, the greatest thing ever in life. What have you achieved? And the man says, peace of mind. Then the yogi bursts into laughter. Start to bring some movement into your fingers and your toes. The man's watching this yogi laugh, movement into the wrists and the ankles, and he's confused. He's like, what are you laughing at? Are you laughing at me? And the yogi's like, peace of mind, the greatest achievement. And he starts laughing even harder, and he's like falling on the floor laughing, movement up into the elbows and the knees, shoulders and the hips, neck and the head. Eventually, there's enough movement through the body that we can transition from the shape we are in back into a seat. And from the seated space, spine gets tall, breath gets fluid, eyes closed. And the man says, yeah, peace of mind. I've achieved it. The yogi looks at him very sternly and he says, peace of mind is not the greatest achievement. Peace of mind is the bare minimum so that you can enjoy your dinner. With our next inhale, we'll bring our hands together at heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, and especially on throughout the end of the year, can you remind yourself daily, constantly, that there is more than just being able to enjoy dinner? And try to expand well and far beyond that and see how it changes your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Sunday. Appreciate the heck out of you. Have the most beautiful week, day, year, whatever it is, till I see you again. I'll do this next Sunday and I'll do it tomorrow night if you want to move. Love you. Mwah.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.